Hey everyone, you're listening to The Common Thread, the official podcast of the Howard Thurman Center. I'm Amanda Dowd.
I'm Howard DePass.
And I'm Ann Jacob.
Ann Jacob is coming to us today. She's a new student ambassador, so she's going to be helping us out. Will's off doing his thing, so we're really excited to have Ann on today. And we also have a very special guest on. We have Maureen Mahoney, the director of SARP. That's the Sexual Assault Response and Prevention Center. Thanks for coming on, Maureen.
Of course.
So we're going to be talking about some things today that I think are very relevant to, living on a college campus, and that is what happens when there is a sexual assault on campus. And just to clarify, this is not going to be about rape culture. Instead, we're really going to be talking about victim advocacy and what you do when a situation like this arises. I think this is something that's really relevant to everybody, knowing if you're going to be on a college campus.
Definitely. It's not something that applies to one particular group of people, not necessarily women or, it's general. And I think that this is a topic that not enough people really dive into. So,
yeah, I've learned a lot just researching this. And I think whether or not this is something where you're a victim of an assault or you know someone, this is something that everybody should know about. So we're really excited to talk about this today, Maureen.
Great.
But just to start, we want to know a little bit about you. So you have been the director of SARP, which kind of officially started just last summer, but you've been with the university for a long time.
Right. I started with the university in 1994.
Wow.
As the crisis intervention counselor. And the crisis intervention counselor for a long time was in the behavioral medicine clinic. So I carried a regular caseload of behavioral medicine students in addition to being on call and being the first responder to crises on campus.
Okay.
Not just sexual assault, but any situation, traumatic situation that affected an individual or the community.
So what was your professional background, and what kind of got you into this particular field?
I have a master's degree in social work. I'm an LICSW in Massachusetts licensed independent clinical social worker. And I also have a lot of family therapy training, and started out clinically as an outreach family therapist up on the North Shore. And we worked with families that were at risk of the children either being put into foster care or parents losing their parental rights, or the children were being transitioned home from residential care or foster care. And working with the families, I really became really interested in working with children who had been sexually assaulted or sexually abused, and through that working with the families. And that spread out to doing some guardian ad litem work in the courts, and then interviewing students, doing clinical interviews through the district attorney's office. Okay. And one of my internships in graduate school was as a medical social worker. So I had the kind of background that comes in really handy for this position. It was a blend of understanding how the medical system works, understanding how the legal system works. My other internship, and I went on to work there for a while, was in the counseling center at Wellesley College. So I just kind of happened to hit what seems like very randomly hit all of the points that were necessary for this position.
Right. Very interesting.
I guess that's how you know you're meant for it.
I guess so.
Yeah. All kind of came together.
Yeah.
Okay. So you did start, SARP was just started really officially on the books. Was it July 1st of last summer?
On paper, it was July 1st.
But you were the crisis counselor for a while before that at BU.
Yes.
So at some point you left the main behavioral medicine center and you started doing that?
Yes.
So
my job title was crisis intervention counselor, and I was in the behavioral medicine clinic, which is in student health services, the layers of departments here.
You can get it all so mixed
and
up.
SARP is also under the auspices of student health services.
Okay, right. So I know that when we met a few weeks ago and talked, and you were very clear that you want to make sure that misconceptions about sexual assault are cleared up, because there are a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about what happens when something like that is reported. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe some that immediately come to mind?
Sure. I think that one of the things that's really important about our office, our department, is that the 3 crisis counselors, we're all licensed either social workers or mental health counselors, licensed by the state of Massachusetts. So what people tell us, with certain caveats, stays with us. So sometimes the use of the word reporting sexual assault is really a misnomer. People don't report to us. It's like saying I reported a toothache to my dentist.
Right.
People just don't come to us and report. And I think oftentimes people get that confused with reporting to the police or reporting to the Office of Judicial Affairs here. We're clinicians. We have what our goal is as the clinicians in SARP is to provide free 24-hour confidential care for and advocacy for BU students. And that entails, giving students what their options are in terms of medical care, in terms of safety, in terms of what's available to them through the judicial system, either internally at another college sometimes, if that's where the assault took place, what law enforcement can help them with, and to help students. None of us can foresee the future, but to kind of predict what some of the possible outcomes of some choices may or may not be. And oftentimes what we'll talk to students about is making decisions now that someone can look back on in, I typically say, like 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, and say to yourself, based on what I knew then, I made the best decisions possible for me. We oftentimes are the people or the person in a situation that doesn't have an opinion about what the student chooses to do or chooses not to do. Roommates have opinions, friends have opinions, partners have opinions, parents have opinions, but we are there to support the student in the choices that he or she makes.
Just to sort of go into more detail about that, I know that sometimes whenever students have crisis, the first instinct is to go to their best friend or their family member, somebody who they're close to, because they do have that substantial connection with them. But what are some of the benefits of actually going to a licensed professional, a clinician who can help you? Even though there may be that barrier of trust and confidentiality with the person. What are some of the benefits of actually seeking professional help as opposed to going to your gut instinct of running to whoever?
I mean, I think if it's really important that if a student is comfortable to have that support system of family, of friends, of partners, and that what we do is supplement that with good solid facts and information. That somebody's parents living in France may have no idea how Massachusetts or legal system works.
Absolutely.
Somebody's who that distracted me. That the more support a student can get, the better. And we're also able to go places with students to physically accompany them. If a student wants to go to the hospital emergency room, and can also help students with intervening with academics, and oftentimes will help students tell their family about what happened. To sit down and give them the words to talk about, an incredibly difficult situation.
Absolutely.
And I want to hit on one point that you mentioned right there,
Sure.
where you can help people tell their family if they so choose. The difference between your office and, say, well, really any other office at BU is that you're not required to tell anyone.
No, actually, we're forbidden from telling anybody.
But
being a licensed clinician, we have to abide by patient privacy and confidentiality. And the two offices on campus that do that are bound by that, but for different reasons, are the medical professionals and student health services, which we're under, and the clergy.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. That makes sense.
Okay.
That makes perfect sense.
Definitely.
No one ever thinks about them.
Oh, my chef. Well, they're great. They do great
Brother
things.
Larry.
Yeah,
That's
I know
awesome.
Brother Larry. I'm gonna have to tag him in this now that we said
Exactly. You have to.
But the clear distinction that I want to make is that, for example, your center, the clergy, they don't have to. They are required to not report it.
Right.
But, for example, the Dean of Students' office is required to let the family know if something like that is reported.
That's their regulation. I don't know if it's a requirement, but their policy is that if there are concerns about a student's health and or safety, and having been assaulted is a concern to them, that they will tell informed students' family. One of the things that I have done in the past is advocate for students who have reasons that their family shouldn't know.
Can you elaborate on that at all?
Are you referring to religious tradition or?
D, all of the above. I think the most concrete example is a student from years back who, said to me, her family emigrated here when she was an infant. And, she said, I don't know the words for what happened to me in Cantonese. I cannot explain this. I actually don't have the words to tell my parents.
Wow.
So, we talked about that and just decided that it was just too painful for her at that moment to do that.
Wow.
Okay.
And do you think that has, I don't know, and maybe this is hard to gauge or hard to tell, but do you think actually restricting it from, best friends or family is more detrimental to the victim than getting it out there, or?
I think it depends on the context and the situation and the relationships that people have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay.
I don't think that a blanket statement about what's helpful and what's not is possible.
Right.
Oftentimes we'll help students explore the relationships that they have with people, their concerns about telling and not telling, and also sometimes the negative fallout from doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, the vast majority of students at not just BU, but on any college campus who are sexually assaulted know their assailant. Yeah. Which means that, and there's a spectrum, anything from, being in an intimate relationship with the assailant to having it be, your roommate's brother's roommate at another school. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of, knowing the assailant. And, typically it oftentimes creates a huge polarity between the groups of friends, and it can be incredibly, incredibly damaging, especially if it's two people on the same floor, two people on the same hall, two people in a very small program here. There's some programs here that are really tiny.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, and I mean, this isn't something that your office deals with. This is more of a judicial aspect. But that's actually become a huge question on a lot of college campuses now. When you have a sexual assault that or an accused sexual assault that takes place, and the alleged victim and the alleged accuser or the alleged rapist, they live together.
Yeah.
What do you do? Because you can't. condemn someone before they're proven guilty, but you don't want to further traumatize the victim, and it's a very sticky situation. I've read a lot of articles recently where they're not sure how to handle it. It's one of those gray areas that what's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that a lot of BU students don't realize is when you sign the housing contract, there's a lot of fine print on it, so that you can be moved.
You cannot, or you can?
You can.
You can.
Okay, and so I guess that in the midst of, students who do suffer from rape and sexual assault, they often think that, like, while they're frantic, they think that nothing can be done to remove them from the situation. When in actuality,
the person who's been assaulted can be moved, but also the person who has assaulted can be moved too.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that's something that my office works with the Office of Residence Life and the Office of Judicial Affairs to make happen in a way that hopefully isn't in a way that's the least damaging possible to everybody involved, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Right.
So, so what would be the ramifications actually of coming to SARP and informing, the professionals there of an assault? I mean, I'm assuming that most cases you probably have a talk with them as you described, and I don't know what the process would be. Would you report it to DOS or go?
No, we don't report it to anybody.
Okay, so
we're bound by confidentiality.
Okay.
Like, if I were to do that, I would lose my license to practice in Massachusetts.
Wow.
So what would be the process for the student then?
If the student gives me permission, I can talk to anybody
Yeah.
that the student allows me to. Definitely.
Just out of curiosity, when you say give permission, is it verbal permission? Do they sign something?
Both.
Both? Okay.
Yeah, there's an actual it's called
form.
an ROI release of information form.
Okay, I got it. So one of the things that I know that we talked about before is there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Every case is very different, and you are a huge proponent of we don't have an opinion. We are doing what is best for the victim and best for what they want to do that they can look back on and be okay with.
Yep.
Let's go with perhaps the scenario that maybe most people would push them to do, and that's to report it to authorities, and which I think is, a lot of people would push them to do that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you would support them through that?
By authorities, who do you mean?
The legal part of it doesn't necessarily matter. It could be the BUPD, it could be the BPD, but in terms of, when you walk them through the process.
Okay, it actually does matter where it happens. A lot of people don't realize that BU's campus, not only are we in 3 cities, Boston, Brookline, and nobody remembers the boathouse in Cambridge.
Wow.
Those 3 cities are in 3 different counties. Boston is in Suffolk County, Cambridge is in Middlesex, and Brookline is in Norfolk County. So that does matter. Okay. If a student knows where it happened, that's really important. And part of the reason that that's important is so that students don't have to keep telling the story. If a student is assaulted in BU-owned property, then the student can go to the BU police. There's also the option to go to, let's say it happens on South Campus, to go to the Boston police. If it's South Campus in Boston, I just realized some South Campuses in Brookline. If the assault happened in Alston, it's the Boston police. BU police have jurisdiction over BU-owned buildings.
But a student can choose.
Absolutely, which is what we give them, the choice.
Well, no, I mean, if they want to report it, even if they're on campus property, they can bypass the BUPD if they want and go straight to
If it happens on South Campus, for example, they can go to the Boston police.
Okay. I'm just curious, do you know if the Boston police would report it to BUPD anyway, just as a courtesy? Or?
No, there's a lot of regulations around protecting the identity of a sexual assault victim. Like, it's not published in newspapers. Right. It's not, a lot of police records are public. If anybody's ever worked for the Free Press, they'll go down to BUPD and get the police reports. It's not included in the. If anything, if it is included, and any identifying information is redacted.
Okay. So there is that option, but not all victims of sexual assault want to report it, or they're not ready.
The vast majority don't.
Really?
Yes.
The vast majority? Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that and what goes on in the reasoning? And
I think oftentimes people's first response after a trauma is disbelief. That people are in shock, that you just want to, I think a lot of people want to believe that it didn't happen, believe that, nobody they know is going to hurt them. I think we're all raised to believe it's going to be some sketchy-looking person, maybe on the T, that you can identify. It's not some, nice-looking college student, that could fit in with your friends, or possibly is one of your friends, or someone that you know or study with. And a lot of students' first response after their health and their safety has been taken care of is, I just want to forget this happened. I want things to go back to normal. I want to go back to normal. I want to go back to normal. And I think for a lot of people, pushing it away works until it doesn't. And it takes a huge amount of energy not to think about something. And, one of the things that we talk to students about, as I had mentioned before, was, not closing any doors behind you. That, if somebody wants to leave the option open at any point in time to talk to the police, that's there. If someone comes into my office 2 years later and says, I think I want to talk to the police, or I think I want to talk to BU's judicial system, we'll make that happen. We'll facilitate it.
It is understood, though, that there is, a time frame for how successful that will be. Am I right? There's reporting it, in terms of.
Yeah, it's another one of those situations that's really complicated, and I would typically leave that up to the police to explain it to the student.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll just I'll edit in, because I know this isn't your area of expertise. Even though it is open at any time to go to the police, it is much more difficult to, prosecute a case if you don't have physical evidence, which if it's several years later, most likely you don't at that point have any.
Yeah, there's a even with physical evidence, people talk a lot about rape kits, but in my experience, oftentimes what can happen with a rape kit is that the assailant's attorney will say that it was consensual sex. Yes,
right.
There's evidence of sex, but it was consensual.
Can you elaborate on? Wait,
no, go for it.
Okay, can you elaborate on a rape kit? I've never heard of that before.
No.
In
Massachusetts, the sexual assault nurse examiner, a SANE nurse, are the only people that can collect evidence to be used in court in cases of rape. And they have a very, very organized procedure for doing that. And typically what happens is if a student wants to have evidence collected, we'll go to an emergency room. My emergency room of choice is Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center.
That's good to know. Yeah.
And from there, the SANE nurse is called. People always ask how long it's going to take, and it depends on where the SANE nurse lives and if there's a Red Sox game, to be honest, how the traffic is.
Wow.
Understandable.
Yeah.
It's really understandable.
Yep.
You behave with it anyway.
Exactly.
We know.
And the SANE nurse will explain to the student evidence collection. We'll take the student's statement. The student can say no to anything. The student has done nothing wrong. If the student doesn't want certain, things collected, or doesn't want to leave the clothes that he or she was wearing. That's a big one. A lot of students are really attached to those particular jeans that don't want to leave them, which I totally understand. Then at any point, the student can say, no, I'm not interested in that, or I don't want to do that. And there is, for each police department has a time limit. The rape kits go to the police department where the assault occurred. And each police department has a time that they will keep them. Frequently, they keep them much longer than that.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Newton destroys them, is my sense. They might. I mean, that's just my sense.
Yeah.
But I've had a student who got a rape kit released from Newton, processed from the Newton police several years after they collected it.
So partial rape kits where they choose not to partake in one aspect are completely doable.
Absolutely.
Is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
That's important to know, because I was fuzzy on that before.
Yeah.
Can you choose to not do something, or does it completely mess up the procedure?
Right.
No.
Okay.
No.
And I also would imagine that in in students coming to SARP and telling of when they think they've gotten sexually assaulted, a lot of lines can be blurred, and a lot of confusion can take place, and whether it actually has happened. And I would imagine that students, preferably women, can actually think that they may have done something to provoke it. There can be self-blaming. Do you find that a lot of that takes place?
I think that it's just human nature to try to assume some type of responsibility for when something goes wrong. Because if we can somehow manage to do that, then we can prevent it from happening again.
Very true.
And, a lot of times people have to do a lot of kind of mental gymnastics to figure out their responsibility. But the vast amount of students that come to our office haven't done anything differently that particular night or afternoon or evening than I'm comfortable saying thousands of other people their age hadn't been doing at that same time. Yeah. Whether it's studying with a friend, whether it's going to a party at the Gap, whether it's watching a movie in somebody's room, it just has, that incident has a very, very different outcome.
Right.
And I also think that there aren't a lot of students who have genuine questions about what happened to them. That there are students that come into my office and say, I don't know what to call this, but I feel really violated, or I don't know if this is what rape is or not, or but oftentimes I'll say to students, if you're sitting here talking to me, something bad happened. Most people are really happy to go through 4 years at BU never meeting me.
Yeah.
And I don't take it personally.
No, not at all.
Well, I'm glad I met you.
Likewise.
Right.
I have a question that just occurred to me when he brought up self-blame. Not everyone you see is a woman. Not everyone you see is female. There are definitely male victims of sexual assault. Is there a difference in how you treat male and female victims just in respect to the stigma surrounding male sexual assault? Do you find that you have to approach it differently?
I think that there are a lot of different types of stigma involved in having been the victim of a crime. And gender is definitely one of them. Definitely. That I think that a lot of male victims really do not want people to know because of that. Or have a hard time having friends that accept that they've been the victim of a crime, that that just doesn't happen, or
Right.
how did that happen? What did you do? Kind of thing. So I think male victims tend to be a lot quieter.
I also think that it can be oftentimes looked upon as like an actual joke.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You know, like there's, it's the idea is so, it's so distant and so unfathomable that it becomes something comical, and that in and of itself it desensitizes the situation and takes away the severity of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's a tricky situation, I can imagine, as a counselor. Are there any other, common maybe scenarios that happen that you see a lot that you just want to talk about, with situations with family, with friends pushing for things, and how you respond?
A lot. Oftentimes, students' friends will come to us not knowing how to support a student, not knowing, especially I think when there's a fraction in the group, a fracture in the group, should I say. When there's, a group of friends that knows both the victim and the assailant. And oftentimes people will come to us and, we'll meet with people and talk about how you can support the person, And it can be, I think, because one thing that almost every single student that I see says to me is that, when I was in high school, I knew somebody who was assaulted, or my sister was assaulted, or, my roommate was freshman year, and I always thought, if this happened to me, this is what I would do. Well, I'm not doing that. It's really different than what I thought I would do, and I think it takes a long time to process that, because we'd all like to believe that if something happens, we would do what we might consider to be the right thing. Right. Like there's a right thing and a wrong thing. And it takes a long time sometimes to accept that there's a right thing for me as opposed to what I thought it was.
And what are some of the best ways that friends can offer support when sexual assault happens to another good friend, a best friend, even an acquaintance? How can we support each other as a community?
I think to let people know that you believe them, to not, for lack of a better word, gossip about it, to ask the students permission to talk about what happened, to recognize that, I don't know how many students have said to me, no, I don't want anyone on my floor to know because I don't want to be that girl. I don't want to be known as the girl that got raped. And, I've had students tell me that the weekend after they got raped, they were watching a movie and having a good time and heard people saying, well, it couldn't have happened. Look at her. She's having a good time. To recognize that after a trauma, people really do want things to get back to baseline, back to normal. And if somebody can sit and lose themselves in some silly movie, that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and people should be supported in that. And to give friends permission to talk about things when they want to, and permission not to talk about things.
Yeah. So besides providing the resources at SARP, do you refer students to, let's say, Marsh or like other centers on campus if they need it?
Absolutely. We refer students to Marsh Chapel, groups at BARC and Beth Israel Deaconess.
Can you just clarify what BARC is?
Oh, sorry.
You don't know. It's okay.
Boston Area Rape Crisis Center.
They're a great organization. They do some wonderful work.
And, I think we're incredibly fortunate to be in a resource-rich area. So we definitely take advantage of the resources that are available to us, both within the university community and within the community at large.
Yeah, and then, so once a student addresses this issue, do you follow up with them later, or do you let them come to you?
Both.
Okay.
Both. I've had students that were assaulted their first year here that have gone on to do postgraduate programs here that I've seen off and on for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
If someone were to come to you, in distress after an assault, and then just kind of, for lack of a better word, cut off contact, or kind of just stopped communicating. What do you do? I'm just curious. What are the procedures for dealing with that and making sure they're okay while respecting their boundaries?
Right. Well, one of the things that we'll talk about during the first couple of times that we meet is just that. That if a student is having a really good day, if the weather's like it is today, and meeting with me is just going to bring them down. Text me, send me an email, call the office, and just say, everything's fine. I'm just going to, cancel my appointment today. I'll see you next Thursday at 2, kind of thing. And, to talk about that, and we're there to help students. They're not, this is such an old-fashioned word, but beholden to us, and to meet with us. And, students, as long as I know they're okay, and sometimes just sending somebody a text saying, missed your appointment today, let me know everything's all right, and do you want to reschedule? And if somebody says, overslept, or no, everything's fine, or, was studying, lost track of time, that's absolutely fine.
So if a student... But if a student just completely didn't make any contact, didn't tell you what was going on, you would at least follow up once to...
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Have you ever had to be persistent about it to try to reach them, like where they have been avoiding you? Like in that situation, where do you draw the line? When do you stop if that were to happen?
I think most students would just say, can I take a break?
Okay. Which
is absolutely permissible.
And if, say, for example, you mentioned having concerned friends that they come to you. If a concerned friend came to you and said, my roommate, my best friend was raped. I think she needs to talk to you. I think she needs to do this. I think she needs help. Would you ever contact the student, or do you make it very clear the student has to come to you?
No, I would probably reach out to the student.
Okay, so you're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm glad I know that.
One of the interesting things that I thought you said was, you've
just
had...
one?
In fact, plenty.
One of the many.
Right. I think I liked when you said that you've had students who you followed up for as many as 7 years. So whether you want to speak on that particular student who comes to mind, or any student who you've kept in touch with for a long period of time, do you find that I don't want to say coping, but just getting through the process,
healing.
Healing. The healing process has been effective over such a long period of time. Do you find that those sort of terrors still come back into place? Like, how does that work for such an extended period of time?
I think with any traumatic incident, any traumatic happening, that there are some after effects that follow us for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And that, one of the things that we do in treatment and therapy is kind of, some triggers are predictable. And, if people know that, they're less scared. And I think that, having kind of a touchstone. I have students that have graduated that send me baby pictures of their kids, and
that's awesome.
When they graduate from law school, and that still send me Christmas cards or email me around the anniversary of their assault.
Wow.
And, it's really gratifying to know that people go on and flourish and live rich, continue to live rich and full lives.
Yeah. And it sounds like throughout that you're given the opportunity to actually become like a mother figure almost. And when they
probably now, when I started, I was more of an older sister.
Right.
You're still an older sister. What are you talking about?
A couple of years, it'll be like a nana.
Oh no.
Oh man.
Is that though? You said you get to see people. You do get to see people flourish.
Absolutely.
Is that what makes it bearable? Because you're dealing with. As a counselor, you deal with some very traumatic things yourself, having to deal with this every day.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine it's hard to sometimes go home at the end of the day and
know what's
Yeah.
It is. It can be really, really difficult, especially when, one of the things that the crisis counselors do is it's not restricted to sexual assault or interpersonal violence. We're the first responders for the crises and traumatic incidents that affect the community. And I've had really good training. That's what I always fall back on. And also recognizing it's a little bit of a remove that, I don't make these bad things happen. With or without me, bad things are going to happen to people. And that, I have the privilege of being there after the bad things happen.
So this is a personal question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. But do you have like a daily practice or something that centers yourself after dealing with all this, like a ritual that you like meditate on, or I don't know, something therapeutic that you could be like, wow,
how do you de-stress?
Yeah, how do you de-stress? Or do
I
you
watch
stress?
some really bad TV.
Please tell us what. Give us a show.
Reality shows.
I'll admit right now I watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. How about that?
Do you really?
I do.
Oh, I'm not that hardcore.
I think I just insulted him.
Oh, that's awesome.
I like a lot of the Housewives show. I'm into Bravo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Andy Cohen, gotta love him. See her.
Oh, yeah. I know. I missed him.
Oh, that's a shame. That's such a
But
shame.
no, I mean, I really find that and also just watching people argue about the most inconsequential things, like who gave someone a dirty look?
Right.
Really?
It can definitely lighten the load a little bit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, my life could be like that.
Yeah, that could bother me, but fortunately it doesn't. And I also have a really, really good, personal support system of friends and relatives and family. And when I'm on vacation, I really tend to go far and get away.
You turn off your phone?
Most of the time, yeah.
That's good. You need to have a break. It's important.
Definitely.
It's important for your well-being as a person and as a counselor,
Yeah.
Well, we need to start wrapping up, but I'm just going to hit a few key points, and please ad-lib and correct me if I'm wrong. Going to SARP, completely confidential, and you are 100% behind the victim, and will do whatever they want. If you do want to have a medical exam or a rape kit done, Beth Is Real is a great place to go. You've had great experiences with them.
Absolutely.
The victim can decide whatever they want to do. You will help them tell their family if they want to.
Exactly.
You can offer advice for everybody, and you will continue to advocate for them through every step of the way, whether it's legal, whether it's counseling, for as long as they need.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And location does matter.
And location does matter, and you are going to be there for no matter what, even if it is in 3 counties, which is daunting, but it's there.
I know people don't realize that.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add in that you think we didn't miss, or that we missed?
I think the only thing is that, we're on call 24 hours a day. When you call the 353, actually the phone number spells out SARP, but if you have if there's some phones that doesn't matter, 7277. There's a lot of phones that don't have the numbers and the letters together. Blackberries don't. 617-353-7277. At nights and on the weekends, you'll get an outgoing message that asks you to press 1 to leave a non-urgent voicemail, or press 2 to speak to whoever's on call, and that call gets sent directly to the phone of the person that's on call. So you don't have to deal with answering services, or there's only 2 possible things to press, and I tried to keep the outgoing message as brief and to the point as possible.
So for anybody listening to this, knowing that support is available, knowing that it sounds like you have great relationships with other departments at VU, all working together to
support students.
So I think that is a very important thing for everybody to know, no matter who you are.
Absolutely.
Maureen, we can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. This has been great.
We are so glad to be able to have done this episode, and I know I learned a lot just sitting here.
I learned a ton. Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great.
I feel like this is a great way to end the semester. semester.
Yeah,
Can't
definitely.
believe this is it.
Yeah, this has been an awesome episode. An awesome way to close it out. Yeah.
It has been, yeah.
It's been a great semester, period. Yeah.
It has been a
For
great
the
semester,
commentary.
yeah. We had Anne come on and start helping us. We had you
Yeah.
and Will.
Yeah.
Will's off doing his thing right now, but, you know, Will's been awesome, and we come back in the fall. It's going to be Howard and Will, and we have Greg coming back, which is super excited.
Amazing. It's
Y'all
gonna be
remember
great.
Greg from way back when, and Anne will be abroad, but
She'll be back in the
She'll
spring.
be back in the
I promise.
spring, so
Absolutely.
chill out, guys. Don't worry. We're all going to be here. Well, Maureen, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes,
this has been
absolutely.
great. Good questions. Thank you.
Well, we
problem.
will see you all again in the fall. Until then, this is The Common Thread, the official podcast of the Howard Thurman Center. I'm Amanda Dowd.
I'm Howard DePass Jr.
And I'm Ann Jacob.
And we'll see you next semester.